The most advanced fighter jet ever built is grounded nearly half the time. Not because of enemy fire, not because of a design flaw they just discovered, because nobody can afford to keep it flying. The GAO released a report, April 2024, and buried inside page after page of government language was a number so uncomfortable that Pentagon officials changed their own affordability targets rather than fix the problem. Here's the question nobody in uniform wants to answer. If 1 hour of flying this jet costs more than most Americans earn in an entire year, who approved that? And more importantly, who's writing the check? On page 14 of GAO report GAO-2401673, the sustainment cost projection crossed $2 trillion. Not the purchase price, the cost just to keep it running. By the time this video ends, you won't just know the number, you'll understand exactly where that money goes, who decided this was acceptable, and why the men and women flying this jet deserve far better than what the system is giving them. Stick with this, because the real story starts right now. Here is the number Lockheed Martin puts on their website: $17,500 per flight hour. That's the official Pentagon reimbursable rate for fiscal year 2024. Sounds manageable, right? For a fifth-generation stealth fighter, maybe even reasonable. Now, here's the real number. The Congressional Budget Office and the Government Accountability Office, two of the most respected independent watchdogs in Washington, both put the actual cost per flight hour between $34,000 and $42,000 every single hour this jet is in the air. That gap between what Lockheed says and what the government's own accountants say is about $25,000 per hour, every flight, every year. Think about what $42,000 means in real terms. That is more than the average American household earns in an entire year, gone in 60 minutes of flying. And this jet flies roughly 150 to 200 hours per aircraft per year. Do that math. One aircraft, 1 year, over $6 million just to keep it operational, not including what it costs to buy it. Now multiply that by the over 600 F-35s currently in US service, and the Pentagon is planning to buy nearly 2,000 more. The men and women who fly these machines are some of the most skilled and dedicated aviators on the planet. They train for years, they strap into something that weighs tens of thousands of pounds and break the sound barrier in it. They deserve equipment that works, and the system they're operating inside is failing them in ways that have nothing to do with their capability or their courage. But here's what you haven't been told yet, and this is where it gets genuinely surprising. That $42,000 number, it doesn't even include the biggest cost of all. Stay right here. Most of you watching right now have never subscribed. Over 98% watch and move on. If this kind of real, sourced, no-nonsense content is what you come here for, hit subscribe right now. It costs nothing. It means everything to this channel. Go ahead, we'll be right here. Every single hour this jet flies, the clock starts ticking on 13 hours of maintenance work that has to happen before it can fly again. 13 hours of skilled labor. 13 hours of certified technicians working on systems so complex that most of them require years of specialized training just to touch. The AN-APG-81 radar alone, that's the jet's eyes, requires personnel who go through training pipelines that take longer than some college degrees. Fuel burns through 4,400 kilograms per hour under normal flying conditions. That's roughly $4,400 just in fuel costs for 60 minutes of flight. Switch on the afterburner for a supersonic sprint, and that number triples. Then there are the parts. Every component on this aircraft is proprietary. That means only one company makes them, only one supplier. No competition, no alternative source. If Lockheed Martin sets a price for a component, that is the price. Full stop. Some individual parts cost more than $50,000 each. Engine overhauls run between $500,000 and $1 million per cycle. And here's the piece that genuinely frustrates people who study this program. The aircraft cannot even be serviced in a standard hangar. It requires climate-controlled facilities, specialized lifting equipment, and integrated diagnostic systems that cost millions just to build and maintain. That infrastructure cost gets spread across every flight hour, too, adding another $500 to $1,500 per hour on top of everything else. The pilots know all of this. The maintainers working 16-hour shifts know all of this, and they show up anyway, because that's who they are. The problem was never the people. The problem is a system that was sold to Congress on cost projections that turned out to be, to put it generously, optimistic. Which brings us to the promise that was made and what happened to it. In 2019, the Pentagon set a goal: get the F-35A's cost per flight hour down to $25,000 by fiscal year 2025. That goal was announced. It was official policy. Lockheed Martin told Congress their portion of costs had already dropped 15% since 2015. The program executive officer said he was confident. Optimism was flowing. Here is what the Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation told House Armed Services Subcommittee in testimony that received almost no press coverage. The department does not see a path to get to $25,000 per flying hour by FY25. Not it'll be difficult, not we're working on it. No path. And then the projection for what happens after 2024 made it worse. As the aircraft age, they start requiring what's called depot-level maintenance, the deepest, most expensive level of work. The CBO confirmed costs are projected to flatten and then rise again through the late 2020s and into the 2030s. So what did the Air Force do in response? They raised their own affordability threshold. The original target was $4.1 million per aircraft per year. By 2023, the Air Force had quietly revised that number upward to $6.8 million. The 2024 estimate now projects $7.5 million per jet per year once the program reaches what the Pentagon calls steady state. They didn't solve the cost problem, they moved the goalpost. And the GAO, in language that is about as pointed as government writing gets, noted that the Pentagon has failed to implement a number of GAO recommendations on spare parts management, engine sustainment strategy, and contractor oversight. Recommendations that have been sitting on the table for years. This is where the $2 trillion number comes from, and it's time to talk about that directly. $2 trillion, not $2 billion, $2 trillion. That is the current projected lifetime cost of the F-35 program, according to the Government Accountability Office's April 2024 report. It covers acquisition and sustainment from now until 2088. Yes, 2088, when the last jets are scheduled to retire. The sustainment portion alone, keeping these jets fueled, maintained, and flying, is projected at $1.58 trillion. That number jumped 44% in just 5 years, climbing from $1.1 trillion in 2018. Acquisition costs, actually buying the aircraft, add another $442 billion on top. Here's what makes this number even more striking. The Pentagon has responded to rising costs partly by deciding to fly the jets less often. The plan is to reduce flight hours because that's one of the only levers available to bring annual costs down. Think about that. The most capable fighter jet in the history of aviation, and one of the official strategies for managing its cost is to keep it on the ground more often. Now, who is actually writing these checks? American taxpayers. All of them. The F-35 program carries an annual Pentagon budget of approximately $12 billion. That's every year, year after year, and roughly 58 cents of every dollar the Pentagon spends goes to private contractors. Lockheed Martin alone brought in $66 billion in revenue in 2022.
Meanwhile, foreign allies who buy the jet, countries like Norway, the Netherlands, Japan, pay between $150 and $200 million per aircraft, including service contracts. Their taxpayers did not fund 20 years of development costs. American taxpayers did. The men and women serving in those allied air forces are flying a jet that American ingenuity, American industry, and American tax dollars made possible. That's a point worth sitting with. If you think the American taxpayer and the American military deserve full transparency on where this money goes, type yes in the comments right now. Here's the part of this story that should concern every American who cares about national defense. In fiscal year 2023, the F-35A was available to fly, mission capable, just 51.9% of the time. The Air Force's goal is 75 to 80%. The jet hit its highest availability rate in early 2021 and has been declining ever since. Nearly half the fleet, at any given moment, cannot perform its assigned missions. The causes are documented in specific: chronic spare parts shortages, a heavy dependence on contractor support rather than organic military maintainers, lack of technical data accessible to government technicians, inadequate support equipment, and a shortage of approximately 1,500 trained Air Force maintenance personnel. The F-35's own operational requirements document, the official document that defines what the jet is supposed to do, set a reliability standard. The F-35A meets 2 of the 3 required targets. The F-35B meets 1. No variant meets all of its maintainability requirements. The engine situation made headlines for a different reason. A shortage of fully functional F-135 engines contributed directly to lower aircraft availability. This isn't a combat loss, this is a supply chain problem. The depth of that irony deserves a moment. The U.S. Air Force, the most powerful air force on Earth with a budget that dwarfs the entire defense spending of most nations, has jets sitting on the ramp because of parts shortages and engine backlogs. The pilots and maintainers working inside this system are doing extraordinary work under difficult conditions: 16-hour maintenance shifts, complex diagnostics on proprietary systems without full access to technical data. That level of dedication deserves a program that supports them properly. The GAO has made recommendation after recommendation. The Pentagon has implemented some. Many are still waiting, and the costs keep rising. To understand how unusual the F-35's cost situation is, consider what it replaced and what else is out there. The F-16 Fighter Falcon, one of the most successful fighter jets ever built, still flying combat missions around the world, costs roughly $27,000 per flight hour. The F-35 costs $42,000. That gap represents a jet that is more capable in many specific missions, but also far more expensive to keep in the air. France's Rafale comes in at $16,500 to $20,000 per hour. It requires 6 to 7 maintenance hours per flight hour. The F-35 needs 13. The AV-8B Harrier, the aging Marine Corps jump jet that the F-35B is replacing, actually had lower operating costs per hour than the F-35B for the most of the program's life. The F-35B only dipped below the Harrier's cost per flight hour for the first time in fiscal year 2023. The F-22 Raptor, America's air superiority champion, costs $54,500 per flight hour in reimbursable rates and requires approximately 30 maintenance hours per flight hour. The F-22 is in a category of its own for cost. The F-35 sits in uncomfortable middle ground, more expensive than legacy fighters, less expensive than the Raptor, but falling short of its own availability and readiness targets in ways that undercut the value proposition it was sold on. An aircraft that cannot fly is not a capability. It is a very expensive piece of equipment sitting in a hangar.
$42,000 per flight hour. $2 trillion in projected lifetime costs. 44% increase in sustainment costs in 5 years. A jet available to fly barely half the time. A $25,000 cost target abandoned without ever being reached. And a program that now extends to 2088. The men and women flying the F-35 are among the finest aviators in the world. The engineers and maintainers keeping it airborne work with a level of skill and commitment that is genuinely remarkable. None of this cost problem is on them. The question this video set out to answer was simple. Who pays for one F-35 flight hour? The answer is you do. Every American taxpayer. $12 billion a year. Every year. Headed toward $2 trillion over the lifetime of the program. Whether that investment is worth it, whether the capability justifies the cost, whether the readiness problems can be fixed, whether the system will deliver what it promised, those questions belong in every conversation about American defense spending. The GAO has been asking them for years. Now you know why. If this was the kind of deep, sourced content you want more of, a like on this video takes 2 seconds and it tells us to keep going. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because the next story in this series is one that almost nobody has connected yet. Stay sharp.